Welcome to Hispanic Biz Success Stories. We interview business owners who built successful businesses to learn from them their story. We really want to learn how they built a business. How in the world did they build a business? We want to learn their challenges and their struggles and what the future looks like for them. Today we're very fortunate to have with us Mr. Germán Tréjo, who owns Syoxsa, Inc. here in El Paso. Mr. Tréjo, thank you so much for being with us.
Homero, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you
you
for the invitation.
Mr. Tréjo, what is Syoxsa?
Well, Syoxsa is a distributor business where we distribute industrial gases, medicinal gases, specialty gases, and all the welding supply hardwood.
Industrial gases. What are industrial gases?
Well, you know, it's a variety of different industrial gases, and the most common to talk about it will be oxygen, industrial oxygen, and then argon, helium, which, you know, helium maybe we are more related everybody in regarding the balloons, lifts for the helium, carbon dioxide, which is used in the food industry quite a bit, most of the soft drinks, carbonated drinks, beer, acetylene as well. That's the more common ones as industrial gases.
So your business is having these big tanks that store all these gases.
Yeah, I mean, for us, the way the industry works for the distribution side, you buy the products in bulk with a liquid cryogenic transport, and then you bring it in and transfer the product to your storage vessel, which are also cryogenic tanks. And from there, then you use a pump, which will be pumping the liquid through a atmospheric vaporizer, a specific rate with a specific pressure, to be transferring the portable cylinders, which are high pressure cylinders. And maybe people had seen the cylinders in different places, and it really varies on conditions depending on the properties of each gas.
So it's a highly regulated industry.
Definitely, yeah. It is considered a hazmat industry, which is hazardous material industry. Normally, you handle high pressure in the cylinders, ranging from 800 to 2,000 to even 3,000, 6,000 PSIs, which, you know, when you compare the pressure in one of your car tires, it is only 30-something PSI. So handling high pressure, that is one of the common risks and the issues that any person related to handle this type of products needs to learn and be educated to be able to avoid any accidents.
So you have to be highly trained to manage all of that and to operate.
Yeah, we gotta follow the regulations by OSHA and as well as the USDOT hazmat for the transportation, and obviously the requirements on what is the insurance to be able to cover any possible incident that could happen. And every month we have a safety meeting. We choose different topics, and our plant manager is in charge of taking the training for everybody involved in handling the gases and the cylinders and the filling process and the distribution. So it's something that you always need to keep going and keep everybody aware of the possible risk. And you know, every cylinder, since you're handling a lot of pressure, most of the cylinders are heavy, depending on the size, but I will say an average of 150 pounds. So the weight of the gas is not much. The actual weight is more on the cylinders. So yeah, we need to really put a lot of attention on the security and the safety for the people that is handling the equipment and the cylinders.
You service El Paso in the region?
Yeah, our main market is our main market is El Paso and Las Cruces, but also we have a few accounts, like one account in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we have the capability to go 300 miles around. We have a distributor in Van Horn, Texas, so we can move the product. Mainly, the restrictions starts to come by the distribution cost.
Mr. Trejo, how old is your business?
Well, we started actually this operation in El Paso is kind of young. We started to develop the operation in 2012. After we sold our Mexican operation, that's where we actually started. Our experience in the business, myself experience, comes to be about 27 years since I started working as a sales representative in Chihuahua City for Praxair Mexico. And then I came as a branch manager assigned to the first branch in Chihuahua State for the company, and established myself in 1985 and worked for Praxair Mexico for 2 years, and then start to work with the distributor El Paso Welding Supply, which was a Union Carbide distributor on that time. And the name of Praxair on that moment also was Linde de Mexico, but it was part of Union Carbide. So that's after working with El Paso Welding for about a year, we started developing our own operation in Juárez, Mexico, with the company name of Soldaduras y Oxígeno de Juárez. That's the way we started.
So when did you start your own business in Ciudad Juárez?
Well, the business started in 1987, and it was a really small operation. We started to cross the cylinders from El Paso Welding Supply into Juárez using a small truck. Actually, I was doing that by myself for some short period of time at the beginning of the operation, as we were acquiring customers and needing distribution. Then obviously we start growing, and because the business started honestly on the apartment that I was living, and even I have the necessity to bring my mom from Chihuahua City to help me out, and she helped me out with the phone and taking care of calls. And then I was, you know, as the beginning of any business, handling all the different functions of selling, collecting, distribution, and it was a really fun time. I really enjoyed that. I remember that moments, and I really enjoyed the memories of that period of time when we were really barely starting. And then, you know, as any business starts to catch up and we keep growing, we're able to rent our first location, which was in Anagua Street between Jose Borunda and Vicente Guerrero. We rent a small location. I mean, no more than, I will say, 3,000 square feet, and with a small office and a warehouse to set up our cylinders. And then we keep bringing one trip a week. Maybe on that moment, if I remember well, was maybe about 50 cylinders a week. Then we went to 100, so we needed to look for a different way to be more efficient to handle the cylinders come back and forth. And then we start to hire a driver to be able to do that. So I keep selling, and my mom still was helping me, being the receptionist, secretary, invoice manager. And after that, well, we hire a person to take care of the warehouse and customer starting to come to the store, and then we start to bring some hard goods part of the inventory and keep developing until on that moment, I believe that was 1992 when we switched from that location that we keep it as a branch and left one main operation on that. And then we move and rent a location in, that was, right now is Paseo de la Victoria, almost Gomez Morin. On that time, that was 1992, if I remember well, RCA Thompson was still there, and almost the opposite corner where we were. And in that location, we keep growing. The amount of employees was about, I will say, going up to 15. And we already have 2 drivers, and the floor to receive the customers, shop floor to receive the customers. And then we went to a more interesting moment where, because we were moving 250 cylinders per week in a platform back and forth. So it was quite a bit of manual labor to handle that amount of cylinders. So was the right time of going into the next step and start our own filling operation. And we were able to sign our first bulk supply agreement with Air Liquide America Corporation, and that was 1994, if I remember well. And from there, the operation came to be more efficient. We start with liquid oxygen at the beginning, then we add the liquid nitrogen, and then we add the liquid argon tank, and finally we got a carbon dioxide 6-ton capacity vessel. And then we move investing in tube trailer for the helium. And basically all these I'm telling you now is happening in between 1987 to 1996. And on that time, the maquiladora industry in Juarez was growing in a pretty good pace. So double digit most of the years. So that really helped us to be in a fertile market to be able to grow. So it was a really interesting moment. We were able to grow up about 22 employees, 23 employees, more or less. And we got to the moment of thinking of branching out. And the first opportunity came out to open our first branch in Chihuahua City, where we went in 2003. And for that location, we have the opportunity to buy a location in Parque Industrial Chihuahua, where we established a filling plant to be more efficient, more effective for the distribution. And we start to fill industrial oxygen and medical oxygen as well. And then the rest of the gases were filling in the Juarez plant, and we established a weekly trip between our Juarez plant and Chihuahua City. And after that, in 2004, we opened a small branch operation with 3 people in Galicia, Chihuahua. And then that started developing. Chihuahua started with 4 employees. And then in 2006, we find out that Cuauhtemoc, Chihuahua was a really good opportunity with the Mennonite community, which I really enjoy working with them, as well as the Maquila that was located in Juarez, and the industrial business itself developing for Cuauhtemoc. So we opened Cuauhtemoc branch in 2006, and that was another 4 employees on that branch, and it went really well. Honestly, sometimes even was selling higher than the Chihuahua branch, because the industrialized activity from the Mennonites really helped us on that side.
That's pretty much farming, the Mennonites?
Well, it's more than farming. That's what we, most of everybody know the Mennonites, which they do pretty well, and the cheese factories. But besides that, they are pretty industrialized. They manufacture trailers, different kind of trailers. Actually, one of the largest trailer manufacturers for the agricultural industry is located right there in Cuauhtemoc. And then besides that, they start to branch out, and other tools for the agricultural industry also are manufactured in Cuauhtemoc. So it was a really nice experience. Wow. I really enjoy always going to work to that branch as well. And 2008, we went and have the opportunity to purchase the building where we are located here in El Paso, Texas, in the Commerce Avenue, at the Commerce Avenue. And then at the same time, we were opening a branch in Hermosillo, Sonora, because previously we signed in a distributor in Mochis, Sinaloa. So we were actually moving product all the way from Juarez to Mochis, Sinaloa. And because of that, that opened the route to make sense and open the filling plant. And we opened another filling plant for oxygen, industrial oxygen and medical oxygen in Hermosillo, Sonora in 2008. And then start to develop distributors in Obregón and Sonora, and then we start looking up and even start to do business with a distributor all the way up in San Luis Rio Colorado, which it was an interesting trip.
San Luis Colorado in southern Colorado?
No, actually, this was San Luis Rio Colorado. It is up in the state of Baja California Norte.
Oh, okay, I get you.
Yeah.
Mr. Trejo, where were you from? Where were you born?
Well, actually, I was born in Mexico City because my dad was part of the Mexican Army. As a young person, maybe 17, 18 years old, he went down to the Heroico Colegio Militar in Mexico City, and actually, he would like to be a pilot, and went to take and learn how to fly the Stearman biplanes.
Yes.
And really interesting plane to fly in. And I was born there, but I only lasted about 9 months in Mexico City. So right now, when I go back, I'm a tourist in Mexico City. I don't know the city too well anyway. Came back to Chihuahua, grew up in Chihuahua City. Went to Monterrey, Mexico for my degree as a mechanical engineer, and that was finished in 1983. And then have the opportunity and the fortune to be hired by Union Carbide, the industrial gas division. On that time, the name of the company was Linde de Mexico, in Chihuahua City as a sales representative for the north part of the state and the city of Chihuahua.
And your mother, where is your mother from?
And sorry, my mom was originally from Chihuahua City, and it's only myself and an older sister, Ana Maria, that also she worked for me many years in the company, and she was in charge of the accounts receivable department. And we grew up in Chihuahua until I left for going to college, and then have the fortune to learn the industry working with Linde de Mexico, Union Carbide.
Sure. But you lived in El Paso for many years.
Oh yeah, I you know, being here in Juarez in the border, I have the fortune to meet my wife Gloria Chanes, and that was 19. Better remember well the date, otherwise I'm going to be in hot water. 1987, and then we married in 1989. So when we married, we made the decision to grow our family in El Paso. So since then, I had been living in El Paso and been a citizen of the United States. And we have 26 years actually living together and grow a family with 3 kids.
You have 3 children?
Yes, 3 children. The older one is 24 years old, Esteban Tréjo. And then Alejandra Tréjo, which is right now 22 years old. And our younger one is Alisa Tréjo, that is 18 years old.
And they've all gone to college except the younger one?
Yes, Esteban and Alejandra actually, they finished their college degree this year. Esteban graduated with a degree in applied math and minor in finance from CU Boulder, Colorado. And then Alejandra went to Boston College with a degree. Actually, she did a double major, psychology and communication.
Wow.
She's a really pretty well paper person. And Alisa is a senior in Loreto.
Okay.
So we are almost empty nest.
Now, your father was a military man.
Yes.
So what did you learn from your father?
Well, as you can imagine, you know, it's a really strict discipline. It was interesting, the moments that I remember, because my dad, when actually when I was born in 1962 and came back to live to Chihuahua City from Mexico City, he started working for the as a chief of operations for the airport in Chihuahua City, and he worked there for about 19 years until he passed away. And I remember, you know, taking the time and living with him, and always was when we were listening the Mexican national anthem, we better stand up and straight, and
even if it was on television.
Even if it was on television, you know, it was part of the procedure that we gotta follow. So you can imagine that was a loving person, but strict and very disciplined.
And your mother, what was your mother like?
You know, my mother, I believe that my personal character is more related to my mom. My mom is my dad was a kind of quiet person, but my mom was completely the opposite. She's a people person, always looking for friends and looking to have meetings and parties, and so I have the fortune to get some of that genes that help me to be able to relate well with people, and that was a good combination.
And I know something else. I know that you also do the Ironman. Tell me about that.
Oh well, you know, one of the that's an interesting background and activity that I developed since I was in the early 30s. The business, when I started the business, I was 27 years old. And, you know, it is an activity that is going to test your character, and it's going to test your emotional reactions. And I find out that first start running really helped me out to release pressure and release stress and keep myself thinking when I was running. And later on, I meet with some friends that they teach me that will be a good idea to start going into a bicycle and then learn how to ride the bike long distance. So I started to do something different, and I believe that is one of the things that somebody always gotta look into it. Keep yourself with some physical activity that will benefit in different ways. And through the years, I was able to go to UTEP and then learn how to swim, because honestly my swimming experience was not that good. And I really enjoy that activity as well, because relax your muscles after the run. So it was a good combination. And then I was fortunate enough to meet Flip Lyle, which he's pretty well known triathlete in the area, and another group of guys that were also doing the triathlons, and they invited me to participate in one of the sprint triathlons and keep going for the challenge series that is run close to El Paso and New Mexico. So I really liked the activity, did my first race, and got into it. And from mid-30s all the way up until now, I'm 53, I had been developing the triathlon experience. It took me maybe a long way to convince myself to start going for the Ironman distance, which is 70.3 miles on the event. And finally, at the end of last year, another friend, which is a really good triathlete as well and pretty good athlete, Mr. Salvador Almeida, invited me to participate with him on the full Ironman Boulder, August the 2nd. And that is the double the distance of the half Ironman, which is 140.3 miles, 140.6 miles. And you do the three activities. The swim goes first with 2.4 miles, and then you jump from the swim to the bike, and you ride 112 miles. And then you finish that, and then you run a full marathon, which is 26.2 miles. So the total distance that you accomplish on one day is altogether 140.6 miles, and depends on your training and your effort. Requires a lot of training, a lot of planning, and being really consistent. So the final time for myself on that event was 12 hours, 10 minutes, and 29 seconds. Wow. But it's an experience. I mean, I always will recommend anybody that would like to go try the endurance sport. It's a really neat accomplishment.
Well, there's certainly a parallel between building a business and endurance sports.
Some way, yeah, definitely, yeah.
But I really appreciate your sharing your story. It's interesting to see the value of endurance, but you made a deep commitment to that. I mean, you've been in that for a long time, and to build your business. Now your business is industrial gases. You're here in El Paso, and briefly, what are industrial gases used for?
Well, that's a short question with a long answer, because it's really interesting, different applications for different gases. Just to mention a few, on the beverage industry, on the food industry, carbon dioxide is used for carbonation of the soft drinks as well as beers, and preservation of different food products on the package industry. Like here we supply a company that they package nuts, and we supply them with liquid nitrogen, and then the vaporizer to be able to convert the from liquid phase to gas phase, because at the end the application uses the nitrogen in gas phase. What you are doing there is basically removing any air that could be in the package that will help to increase the longevity of the, in this case, our nuts, but could be any other food product. So that's a pretty typical application. On the medical industry, well, it's medical oxygen for obvious reasons on the hospitals, different applications. On the argon side, most of the application goes for welding because the electrical and heat characteristics, physical conditions for the argon as itself, that helps to establish the arc and keep a stable arc and clean atmosphere, avoiding the contact of the air on the welding joint. So we sell the argon, straight argon, as well as argon mixes for different welding applications. On the helium, well, the most common helium application that most of us know is lifting balloons. And as well, the industrial side for the helium application is leak testing. So you find different automotive industry, mostly Juarez, using the helium for checking leaks. And then you go with acetylene, which is a combustible gas with higher calorific capacity than propane for cutting metal. And a lot of chops, iron chops and manufacturing factories, they use oxygen and acetylene. As well for bracing, that's a pretty normal application that you can see in the heating and cooling industry, joining copper with silver solder. That's the bracing application. So it is a field where honestly touches many different industries, and I'm telling you about the most general industries. We provide more different to know, hard to find out is hydrogen to the National Weather Service here in New Mexico, in Santa Teresa, where they use the hydrogen in a daily basis to lift two balloons, which help for forecasting the weather in the region. But it's a lot more applications, more technical.
Sure.
That we can.
It's a highly technical business. Now, we were talking earlier, and you started your business in Juarez, and you built a business out of Juarez, and you expanded to Chihuahua and Delicias and Cuauhtemoc, and pretty soon to Hermosillo, but you've always been doing business through and in El Paso, and you were living in El Paso.
That's correct. Yes. So I was crossing every day the border. It was a really big change and a good benefit for everybody, because it's not just myself. Got to be around more than 2,000 people that does that activity every day. You know, crossing, living in El Paso and crossing to Juarez, Mexico, and needed to come back obviously, and taking the wait time on the bridge, and trying to find out when was the best moment to do the drive back. So the fast lane operation, it really changed our lives, to be honest, because that really helped a lot. That was a good thing. So yes, I was doing that for many years.
Now you started. Then when did you move over to start your business in El Paso? You started that early.
Well, you know, as part of since all the gases that we were selling into Mexico came from different U.S. manufacturers located close to the border. We established our corporation in 1999, and that moment we didn't have a store open to the public or any field operations in El Paso. We were just warehousing products and just warehousing cylinders, because also we, for some low volume gases that we didn't fill in our facility, in our plant facility in Juarez, we used to transport that once a week. We had a transport moving acetylene and another specialty gases from El Paso to Juarez. So we use our warehouse in El Paso, and we use our corporation in the United States to buy the products with the different suppliers in the United States, and then export that into Mexico.
What was the name
to
of
the
that?
Mexican
What was
company.
the name of that business?
The original name was Borderland Welding Supply. That started in 1999, and we keep it like that until 2008. That was when I previously mentioned we bought the building where Big Tree Welding Supply used to be located, and then Air Liquide bought that building out. Air Liquide is a French company, French corporation, and pretty solid, pretty strong. One of the first on sales in the world, or second, really close. And then when we bought the building 2008, we made the decision to open a store. And if you remember well, September 2008, that's when the economical crisis started to happen. And unfortunately, one of the industries that was pretty well affected was the automotive industry. On the close months after that problem with the economical situation in the market. So I keep open the operation in El Paso, but I didn't invest in develop that one because we were opening the branch in Hermosillo, Sonora, and I wait until the market settle up, and then we came to the point that in 2010, we have one of our largest competitors from Mexico, the Infra Group, approached us for buying out our total operation in Mexico. On that moment, we got about 45 employees in Mexico, and still a small operation, not too big, but we keep growing, and it was an interesting situation that we analyze and make the numbers and make sense. At that time, unfortunately, also we were living through the insecurity period of time in Juarez and the rest of the state of Chihuahua and other parts of Mexico. Unfortunately, went in a pretty bad moment for the security. And business owners, as our regular people, were affected for that. And anyway, I evaluated my options, and I made the tough decision of selling the Mexican operation, but it was a good business decision. And I still have the memories coming back, and sometimes wish to have that operation still going. But it is because you develop the business step by step.
That must have been a hard decision because you grew that business. That was, like you said, your baby.
Definitely.
It took you 20 years?
After it was 23 years.
Okay.
23 years when we sold that operation, and then I refocused, finishing the sellout and delivering all the cylinders and branches and customers to the new owner. And in 2012, then I start hiring a plant manager and people to help us develop the operation in El Paso, looking for salesmen, and then almost starting from scratch because our sales in El Paso were pretty low. So it was another learning process, another challenge, learning the steps, how the market was working. It is a more competitive market here than when we were competing in the Mexican market. We were competing mainly with two large corporations, publicly owned. Well, Infra is not public, sorry, that's a private company, but Praxair, it is public. And here we were facing competition with 5 companies, 2 of them public, large corporations, and then another independents, which are 3 companies, 2 more companies and ourselves, actually 5 total. And learning the mechanics of the market, Juarez, Mexico, even Chihuahua, you know, all the other cities that I mentioned, they have maquiladoras. They have manufacturing industry established and growing. Here in El Paso, the level of manufacturing is really low, to be honest. It doesn't compare the size of the market. In our case, for our industry, is quite a bit larger in Juarez than what it is in El Paso. So with more competition and less market share to have for everybody, it is more competitive, which should make it more interesting, more challenging. And with 3 years, we have been developing to 10 employees so far. And learning the process, you need to learn how to sell to the federal government, how to sell to the city of El Paso, how to sell to the university, all the other different educational institutions, and as well as the private market.
Well, there's two questions we have to ask you. One is about the difference in business between doing business in Mexico and doing business in El Paso. And of course, the other question is how you survived the turmoil that hit Juarez. But let me ask you about doing business on both sides. What's the difference between doing business in Mexico and doing business in the U.S.?
Well, that's a good question, and definitely it is a lot of similar concepts, but obviously one thing that is completely different in our Mexican market, because the type of the industry, the level of knowledge and applications on the different gases that you handle, it have more opportunities over there than what we find here, and just because the market is different. Regarding regulations, obviously the Mexican industry and the Mexican government unities are less regulated than what we find in the United States, which I believe that it is good in the long term, and because it helps you to keep yourself with the right training for the employees and the development of the personnel regarding all the safety measures that you need to keep, since we are handling a hazard material. Regarding the government implications, honestly, the Mexican entities are still developing, are still growing, and even that rules exist, some of them are not applied as we wish that will be, and well, that it has pros and cons. Over here, everything is set up, and honestly, it is easy to learn, but yeah, you need to spend the time and you need to be responsible to put attention of that rules and regulations and make sure that you comply. One of the important factors in our industry is the distribution of our products. Mexico is adopting most of all the hazmat rules that the US DOT has established in the United States. And little by little, you know, Mexico is coming to be on the same way, which is great for the maquila industry and the rest of the industry in Mexico. That's what I can tell you about the difference.
Are business people different in Mexico than they are in the U.S.?
Well, that's a good question, and more that I will say is more than because a business person is going to be a business person any part of the world. The difference comes from the culture, and that's when you find that the Mexican culture is different from the American culture. But actually, in the border, we have 3 cultures, and that's something that took me a little while to learn. And the first culture that you find, obviously, is the Mexican culture, that is original Mexican people living in Juarez and the rest of the state of Chihuahua. And then in the border, in El Paso, you find the Anglo culture, but also you find the Mexican-American culture, which is the mix of both. And you need to be aware how to deal with all the different ones. Because even a joke that you can say and have fun with that joke in Mexico, and you come and try to go with the same joke here with an Anglo or a Mexican American, it could be a big mistake. So that's that type of differences that you really need to learn and understand, and being able to play in any game, any area.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, and then let me ask you a question about that. Is the Mexican business person and the Mexican American business person, they're different people?
Well, you know, I through my experience, I believe the difference came from that different culture. But you find as good business persons in Mexico as good as here in El Paso. And as well as you can have a bad experience in Mexico, you can have a bad experience as well here. The main factor, I believe, that will be learning and identify the way to relationship with each of them.
Let me ask you about when the time you were selling your business, the violence in Juarez was very strong. It affected our lives on the border tremendously.
Unfortunately, yeah.
What was it like for your business to be in the middle of all that violence? What did it mean to your business?
Well, you know, it affected us in the situation that some of our customers were companies that were doing business indirectly with the maquila business. And some of them have like a muffler shop or another a small iron shop. You know, they unfortunately were affected by people looking to take advantage of that lack of public security, and extortion was one of the main activities that was happening. Abductions also were happening almost every day for some period of time. And we were in the situation where the customer was in the need of closing the business or reducing the time of operation because obviously somebody came and asked for money to be paid every week, otherwise something will happen to them or their family. And that was sad to listen to. And even some of our employees, we have the case of one of our operation managers being assaulted, and thank God he didn't get killed, but was really close to going to that situation. So we were in the awkward situation of moving him from Juarez to Hermosillo for about a month until things settled down, because the people that was involved in this assault, they were captured, but then they were related to a gang here in Juarez, and the gang was able to find out where he was living. Then they start visiting his family and looking for him. So you know, things like that really affect your operation, and implication on the family. He was forced to move his family all the way back to Oaxaca state, where they were originally coming from, and he was living by himself, staying in Hermosillo, and then coming back to Juarez, and then going back to Hermosillo. In one weekend, I was obligated to invite him to come and stay in a hotel here in El Paso, because he got a visit from the bad friends, and fortunately he was not there, but you know, his family was pretty affected emotionally, and said, well, you know, let's do something, and that's what we were forced to do. So situations like that, you know, you really don't want to be around.
So what years was that?
That was 2000, at the end of 2009.
And so when did you sell your what is business?
The final decision was done on July 2010.
So part of the decision to sell was because that was a difficult situation to live in?
You know, it came to my analysis as well, because obviously, I mean, I was going every day, most of the days, into my office, and knowing that maybe a friend or a relative of a friend was kidnapped, and some of them, unfortunately, were not able to come alive of that experience. So it was not a good time. And obviously, the family, you are taking a risk that sometimes was not worth it. And it put a little bit of additional doubts on my mind. Yeah. Besides, that was a good business opportunity to do it, but it was tough to make the decision for sure.
So you've got your business in El Paso, and you sell your operations in Mexico, and you come to El Paso. Of course, you'd been living here all along, and you've been commuting between El Paso and Juarez. Let me ask you, Syoxsa, what does that stand for?
Okay, good question. Syoxsa is a short name for the original name of our company in Juarez, Mexico, Soldaduras de Oxígeno de Juarez. And then we developed a brand with which we register. And when we bought the building where we are located right now here in El Paso on Commerce Avenue, I made the decision to switch the name for the American corporation from Borderland Welding Supply to Syoxsa Inc. So we were easy to identify, and few customers still had operations in both sides, and we were able to take advantage of that, like Delphi, by example, to give you one example, and that's where the name comes from.
Okay. So it's a new adventure now. You're growing a business. You've been doing it for several years. You've shared you have about 10 employees now, and insights to growing. I'm going to make a comment. One of the things that I'm learning from you is that you had an awareness of the border. You recognize the different cultures, but you came to do business here with the intent of doing business here the way business is done here.
That's correct.
And I'm saying that because I've run into people who have had business in Juarez come over here and don't make that adjustment very easy. Has that been a hard adjustment to do business here the way they do business here?
Well, and that's another good question, Homero. Definitely you need to take the time and learn the way the business is going to run, because first, the market is different. Second, the culture is different. As we already mentioned, it's two different cultures, actually three even, because we also have Mexicans doing business in El Paso. And then you need to learn the process on how to knock the doors and open the doors with the city, opportunities for the city of El Paso and the federal government, and then the private sector, which is more direct contact, obviously, but it takes a little time. I mean, you need to understand the different regulations, the different rules, the way doing the business in the legal standpoint, similar to Mexico, but obviously the mentality of the customer could be expecting some different characteristics on your offer. And yeah, you need to learn how the decisions are done and which are the variables involved in that decisions to be able to take care of it.
Okay.
And that's really important. If you don't get it, then you can feel that it's impossible to do business and then just stop doing it.
So you've had to learn what the customer expects.
Yes.
Wow. Well, it's a fascinating story, Mr. Tréjo. I really, really appreciate your sharing your story. And you're still growing the business. You've got a way to go.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess any person that make the decision to be an entrepreneur is choosing a profession and life profession.
It's an obra. It's a work.
Yes.
And you've certainly. Well, it's been a pleasure to hear your story.
Thank you.
And I trust that our viewers have enjoyed hearing Mr. Germán Tréjo's story about how he's built his business here in El Paso and continues to grow and will be here for some time. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this show of Hispanic Biz Success Stories. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
My wife.
Went by fast.
Yeah.
We could go on and on.